Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this week's ISE webinar. Today we're talking about the launch of a really important report that we've done with our ISE members and other stakeholders, and it's on Black Careers Matter. I'll leave it to Tristram to really introduce the work, because he's the one that's very much led this work, and we'll go through the findings very shortly. But let me just give you a quick recap on how our webinars work. We'll be recording this, so if you want to go back and revisit it, you'll be able to do that. We'll send the recording to your link, having registered. You'll probably get that either later today or tomorrow, and we'll also put it on the IEC website, so you can access it there. And also, if you think there's anybody else in your team, anybody else you work with, you think this will be really useful for them, please do share it. We're keen, obviously, that this message gets disseminated as much as possible. The full report becomes available tomorrow. We're doing the full sort of release and press release then, and as members you will obviously get a free copy. We've also produced an executive summary for people outside the organisation, because we very much feel that the findings that we've covered are really important, and it's important we disseminate those as much as possible. So that will be available for non-members, just the executive summary from tomorrow. We're using the GoToWebinar platform which you're on, so we can't see your faces or hear your voices, but what we can do is hear from you in the chat box and the question box. So as we go through, I'll be playing host. I'll be keeping an eye on that function, so if anything pops up in terms of a question that you want answering, please put it in there. I'll keep an eye on it, and we've got time at the end to answer it. We normally do these sessions over an hour, but actually we've added 15 minutes onto this, because we've got, apart from Tristram's presentation, we've got a really good panel of experts, and people have got really important views on this, so we'll be putting them into the conversation after Tristram's done his bit. So yeah, please use that question function to put those questions, and I'll put them to Tristram and our panel a bit later on. But that's enough from me. It's Tristram and the body of the report I think we need to hear from first to get us started. So Tristram, can I hand over to you and you crack on from here?
Yes, great. I will just share some slides, because what I'm really going to try and do is just a very quick run through. I'm aware most people won't have read this. We've only really made it available on the site from today, but it is really well worth a read. Hopefully, there's an awful lot of material in this report that hopefully will be of interest to people, and we'll be talking about it, not just today, but really throughout certainly throughout the month, and hopefully beyond that. So the background of this report is that there's a lot of things going on, which I'll talk about as we get into this, which led our board to think that really we needed to focus the research that we were doing on the issue of students and candidates from Black heritage backgrounds, and how employers could basically work with that group more effectively. So that was the impetus. It came right from the top of the organisation. We then produced a report, which was quite an undertaking. There's quite a lot of material in this, so I'll talk you through that today, and then we'll get into discussing what it means. So we've got a new report and campaign that's launched this month as part of Black History Month. It's building on a lot of previous work ISE have done. I mean, diversity and inclusion are, I think, the biggest theme that we cover as an organisation. It's something that we're talking about all the time, and I think we're responding to a desire for information and ideas from the ISE membership. But I think we're also hoping to lead and engage more in this issue, or perhaps not as engaged in it as they perhaps should be. So the overview of the research that we did was that we reviewed sort of existing evidence and published evidence and data that was out there already. We went out and interviewed 11 students and early career professionals from Black heritage backgrounds, talked to them into quite a bit of depth, got a lot of ideas and information from that group. We interviewed some experts and key stakeholders, and then we went out to the ISE membership. So the ISE membership is employers, but it's also universities, it's also schools, it's also people who sit in the middle of that labour market. So it's a very expert group of people who are working with young people to bring them from education into employment. And we asked them what they thought and what they thought worked. And then we collected 30 case studies of promising practice from different organisations. And out of all of that, we've developed 5 steps, which I'll talk you through at the end, which are designed to ensure that black careers matter. So black people have been in Britain since Roman times. This is obviously, there's nothing new in what we're talking about. The sort of ethnic minority population of Britain is now about 14%, of which around about 3% are black, with another 2% from mixed and multiple ethnic groups. So sort of 5% might be, up to about 5% might be from this kind of black heritage category that we're using. So black heritage includes people from black and African and black Caribbean, other black backgrounds, and as well as people from mixed and multiple ethnic groups with black heritage. So, getting absolutely precise figures on how big this population is are always challenging for that sort of reason. There's so much complexity to it. But what we can definitely say is that we're way past the point in Britain where we can view this as a kind of a nice to have. There's a very, if you're recruiting, a very substantial group of the people that you're both recruiting and that you are going to employ will be coming from a variety of different ethnic backgrounds, including black heritage backgrounds. So it's really critical that we get this right, I think. Now, a lot of the current sort of wave of focus came out of the events in America, the killing of George Floyd, the Black Lives Matter activities that happened and protests that happened there, which then spread to Britain and so on. And in some ways, it's been very interesting that something which is sparked in another country, in another political context, and so on, has had such a worldwide effect. But one of the things that some of the students that we talked about was how this is, there's been long-standing problems which this has shone a light on. And some of them also said that they were concerned that once the kind of focus went away, that the interest in, businesses and so on would wane, and that so it was something that I think we should be concerned about. And I think one of the things that as ISE we're very committed to is ensuring that these issues are not just something that we deal with in Black History Month, but they're something that we talk about throughout the year and something that we carry on kind of talking about and campaigning about, and that businesses make sort of serious and long-term change as a result of this. So we've had protests in Britain as well as in the States and all around the world, and then that's led to kind of responses, I think, from all parts of society. And so obviously, very celebrated, very kind of a celebrated way that the England football team did, but we also want to play our part in ISE, and so ISE members were very keen to respond, and really from that period onwards there were lots of discussions. We have what are often monthly town halls for different sectors where we bring groups of employers together. This issue came up, people were very keen to do something about it. We featured a lot of material on our blogs and our webinars discussing these issues, and we ran a course which was trying to kind of give employers a way of kind of practically addressing some of the concerns that people had, and that then led to this project, I think. So we've been doing quite a lot, and ISE members, our employer members, very much recognise that race is one of the biggest issues that they have to deal with. It's something that they really need to focus on in order to address a diverse and representative workforce, and race really came out as the top issue when we polled our members on this. So we then went out as part of this project. We polled all of our membership. 90% of them agreed that young people from Black heritage backgrounds face additional challenges in the labour market. So it's very strong agreement amongst the membership of the organisation that this is an issue, that it's something that they want to deal with. Where they start to struggle a bit more is what's the right thing to do. So where we started was to try and not reinvent the wheel, and to go out and look at what some of the evidence that's out there says. So what we found was that people from Black heritage backgrounds, there's a massive amount of evidence that we've tried to put available to members through this report, which says that yes, there is inequality, that inequality is both manifest in the education system, where our members are recruiting from, and also in the workforce as well. And so I think that's one of the things that I suppose one of the big findings here is that we need to think about this as both something that the employer side of our membership need to address, but also the education side need to address. And then we found lots of other things as well around how race interacts with socioeconomic background and other diversity characteristics. I think we felt that some of the recent debate, particularly the government report that came out a few months ago, have not always helped to clarify these issues, and there's a lot of confusion about terminology. So in the report, we try and get into explaining some of these things that we see lots of people kind of talking about and panicking about, like institutional racism and critical race theory and so on. So we're trying to kind of always illuminate and to show what these things really mean. But one of the things that really underpins all of this is a very strong belief and a strong range of evidence that shows that where we get diversity right, where we build diverse organizations with different kinds of perspectives in them, there are lots of business benefits to be gained. So we went out and talked to a range of different young people who are either current students or recent students or kind of early in their career, and they gave us lots of really interesting stuff, which we detail with lots of quotes in the report. But I think the kind of key messages were as follows: that when you're Black, you have to work harder to be successful, and this was kind of pretty much a universal thing. People used almost the same language to describe it, everybody we spoke to. And and that's clearly, it's clearly wrong if people are in the situation where they believe that in order to get ahead and to achieve a good life, they need to work much harder than everyone else around them. So that was our first kind of message, that we need to make it employers need to try and kind of do something to try and challenge that situation and make sure that kind of effort put in and talents and so on are rewarded appropriately. But there was also a sort of strong feeling that the education system was not really preparing young people for a diverse workforce. I think important in that it wasn't perhaps helping young Black heritage people to prepare for that workforce, but also it wasn't really preparing young white people for working in a multi-ethnic workforce. And so there's a kind of, I think, a strong sense that we need stronger careers education, but also that careers education needs to engage much more with the reality and some of the challenges of the kind of workplaces that people work in Britain now. Our participants talked about how it was challenging to work in an all-white environment, particularly when they saw that the kind of diversity in the organisation sort of petered out as you got further up the organisation. And they were frustrated that recruitment often seemed to be run entirely by white people, and that there were often no Black people involved. They talked about how organisations need to become more diverse at all levels, and also about some of the challenges of working with white colleagues, and of white colleagues not sort of making the effort to really find out. And one of the things that came up quite a lot is the sense that if you're a Black young person in a firm, then people will often use you as the sort of spokesperson for all Black people, or to ask about anything that they want to know about diversity. And really there was a sort of sense that I think we as white people need to do a bit better than that. So over some of the messages, we backed that up with some additional analysis from some data that we had from a previous piece of research that we've done. So we've kind of done some additional analysis on here, some help from some colleagues from the University of Derby, and we've talked. And what we found was that a lot of these issues that we have found in the qualitative data get backed up in the quantitative data. So, for example, non-white respondents were much more likely to want to hear about the social aspects of work, and to hear from diverse employees, and to hear about organisations' voluntary charity community work. So that sense of sort of doing good due diligence on whether an organisation was actually going to be a comfortable place to work was important, I think. And we've got lots of stuff like this. I won't go through all of the details here. just say something about the employer perspective. I think employers generally recognise that there is a problem. They're quite keen to do something about it. Many of them have got strategies which are developed specifically to look at recruitment of Black and ethnic minority hires. But despite these strategic commitments, when you look at what they're actually able to provide in terms of practical support for candidates from Black heritage backgrounds, it's often quite a lot less. So people know it's an issue, they're developing strategies, they haven't necessarily worked out the right things to do to make a difference. And so then there also was a recognition that it's not enough to focus on recruitment, they also need to address retention, progression, development, and sort of also to gain support from the senior leadership team. And we then have got some data, which this is the one about strategy. So generally pretty good on strategies, quite a lot of stuff here about the sort of way that many organizations have started to put in place these strategies. But as you look down this list, you start to see some of the things that would really be helpful. So providing, say, dedicated support during early career or during selection processes is much less common. And so there's a kind of gap between, I suppose, aspiration and practice here. We then asked, and I won't go through this in detail, but it's very useful, I think, for employers to look at. We asked employers to identify which techniques and approaches they had trialed, which they found to be most useful. And so we get things like, in the recruitment side, we get things like running targeted internships and placements and work experience and things like that. In the sort of recruitment development side, we get things like running mentoring and support schemes and so on. So there's lots of really practical ideas. And we then used that to recruit from a range, well, we got 30 different organizations to put forward a case study of the kinds of things that they're doing. And out of that, we derived sort of 13 different techniques that employers and educators were using to support candidates from Black heritage backgrounds. So creating dedicated careers education programs, providing access to role models, improving access to internships and placements, targeting recruitment campaigns, changing their recruitment processes, sometimes bringing more Black people into the recruitment process as the assessors and so on, providing dedicated recruitment support for different groups, a range of different techniques to listen to Black students and employees, supporting the development and retention through kind of a range of different schemes, building networks within firms. So once people have joined organizations, to give them an opportunity to connect to other people, perhaps other Black people, but also other kinds of supportive networks as well. Developing kind of strategies I've talked about already, but some really kind of powerful stuff as well about trying to influence your partners and suppliers, so that if you're doing these things, you're not alone, using your influence to influence others. Some people talking about corporate social responsibility activities, and then also finally the kind of lobbying and policy side, because organizations have got a big role to play in that world as well. So out of these strategies and out of the experiences of the students, we kind of came up with what we think are the 5 steps for the student employment industry. And in that, we would include schools, we would include universities, we would include businesses, we would include all of the people in the interface, and also, of course, policymakers and the wider society as well. Firstly, we all need to stand together against racism and against bias and against inequality, and not to view these issues as issues which are specifically for Black people to deal with themselves. It's got to be a kind of common sense thing that everybody wants to intervene and everyone wants to challenge. Secondly, in the education system, we need to prepare all students for diverse workplaces, and to recognize that diversity is a reality, and that there are challenges sometimes with it, and that we need all students to be talking about that and thinking about how they're going to manage that. We need to turn recruitment, the actual process of recruitment, into a force for equality. It's a place where we have the chance to actually make a difference. There's lots of techniques set out in here about ways in which people design recruitment processes to make them more fair and equal. And we really feel that there's a lot that can be done there. But it's also really important that we maximise the potential of hires from Black heritage backgrounds, that we don't just recruit a diverse cohort and then leave people to kind of sink or swim, that there needs to be forms of support once people actually start work to ensure that people can progress. And only if you do that will you be able to do the final step, which is about transforming your organization and influencing the world around you. And there was lots of stuff here, and particularly from the students and graduates we spoke to, lots of recognition that we have, that if organizations are not diverse, and they're not diverse at the top, at the CEO level, at the board level, and so on, that students will look at that and see that as a big negative. And so we need to be transforming the whole organization. And there was lots of comments about, well, it can't just be a few Black faces on the brochure. It's all, you know, we understand how this works. We are looking at who's on the board. We are looking at who's in the C-suite. And if you haven't kind of addressed that, then we recognize that your organization still has a long way to go. So these were our 5 steps. They're kind of big picture stuff. There's lots of ideas in the publication, which will give you kind of lots of practical ideas about things that you can do. And absolutely, this is not just something for employers. There's a lot that employers can do, but they can't do it alone. So it also needs to require education, policymakers, the wider society, and so on. So that's enough from me. I think we'll get on to lots of other really interesting conversations, but I will finish here and just stop this and hand back over to Stephen to get the panel sorted.
Thanks, Tristram. Really great summary, because I know it's having read it a couple of times, it's quite a long, in-depth report. And just while our panelists are turning their cameras and microphones on, can I just I guess just ask you a question from me, really? I mean, one of the things that struck me when I read it is that, you know, I'm always trying to distill these things down into what's the core message, which sometimes is very tricky on something like this, such a complex issue. But is it fair to say that one of the core findings of the report, in summary, is that if you're going to try and tackle these issues, you've in a sense got to go all in? It's long term, it's cultural change, it's right through education and into an employment. It's not just a question of, oh right, let's change our recruitment marketing and that will fix the problem. Would you say that's fair to say? Is that what did that strike you as having gone through the whole process of doing this piece of work?
Yeah, I think it's quite tricky, because it's a sort of strategy or tactics question, isn't it? Is that there are lots of little things that you could do that would make people's lives better. I think there's just like, and we've got probably like 100 of them in the report that you could do as an organization that would make people's lives better. And you know, and people even said things like, well, you know, tokenism, there is even a place for tokenism. You know, if you put out a brochure and it has no Black faces in it at all, then it's off-putting. So doing something about your marketing is going to improve things. But clearly that sort of stuff is not enough on its own. And so I think where we've wound up really is what you need is a strategy, and it needs to be a whole student employment strategy, but it also needs to connect to a wider organizational strategy. And some of that's going to be outside of the remit of our members in ISE, because obviously you don't get to choose who's on the board and so on. But I think if you can exhibit some leadership and drive change in the student employment part of the business, it's then also, it gives you a strong place to also advocate for sort of wider change across the business. And so yeah, I think that's right. I wouldn't say, I mean, I think it's better for organizations to do something than nothing. I wouldn't say unless you can get a kind of top-down CEO-led strategy, you can't do anything. I think there's lots and lots of things you can do, but absolutely we're talking about sort of organizational change, transformation, societal change and transformation, not just about sort of changing what's on the brochure.
Fantastic, great. Thanks for some great lead into our panel discussion. Just a reminder, if you've got any questions for Tristram or for our panel, please pop them into the chat, and I'll come back to those probably towards the end. We've left a good sort of 10 minutes, quarter of an hour at the end in the timetable to cover those. But if I can squeeze them in as we go along, I'll try and do that as well. It all depends on if I can kind of manage my other screen as well as pay attention to the conversation. So if you've got any questions or requests from me, to please keep them short. So that it'll be a bit easier for me to read. Right, so let's get into the panel. So what we're going to do is we're going to go around the panel. They're going to introduce themselves. I'm going to ask them also to just kind of just tell us actually what they thought was either the key finding from the report or what they think that the most important thing is that actually we should be tackling when it comes to this agenda. So can I start with you, Frankie, first of all? Yes, if you can just introduce who you are, where you're from, and then just tell us what it is that's really struck you from this whole process of going through this report. That would be great.
Perfect, thanks Stephen. So hello everyone, my name is Frankie Darcy. I am the Graduate Recruitment Schools Manager at Clifford Chance. I suppose not probably my key finding, but something that I did find that was really interesting from the report was that people had mentioned that the teams that are recruiting them aren't diverse, and I think especially if you're trying to recruit diverse talent, and the team that's recruiting them should also be diverse. And I've often said, as a Black woman working in graduate recruitment, lots of the questions that I receive from students are very different to the questions that my colleagues have. The specific things that students want to know are also, very different, and things that they can feel comfortable coming to me with, they may not be able to come to someone else. So I think that's an important issue raised, and something that probably in the industry we all need to look at, because I appreciate that, especially within early careers recruitment, it's not that diverse currently.
That's a really good point, Frankie. I know Laura, who you work with, put a post similar to that on LinkedIn the other day, and I commented back. I think that you look around, when we're back doing our face-to-face conferences, if you go to an AgCast conference, you look out over the audience, and yes, we spend a lot of time thinking about who we're hiring and recruiting, but actually when you put a mirror up to us as an audience, it's not very flattering when it comes to diversity. Great point there. We'll come back to you shortly, Frankie. Lots of more questions for you. Claire, can I go to you next?
Absolutely. Hi everyone, I'm Claire Bainen. I'm the Talent Acquisition Marketing Manager at Enterprise Rent-A-Car. I'm on the ISE Diversity and Inclusion Task Group as well, led by Armin and Yasmina, and also on our Country Council, D&I Council at Enterprise for the UK. So really what stood out to me, well, so much stood out. I mean, I think it's a heavy reminder of my white privilege, not having to face the barriers mentioned that Black young people have to face. But I thought it was really interesting to read, and Tristan mentioned it, that 98% polled recognised the additional challenges that Black heritage students face. But yet, so many have a strategy from an attraction perspective, but only 25% were offering support to candidates from Black heritage backgrounds. So I really feel that, there's certainly that improvement in intensity on attraction, but there's so much more to do once students are applying for opportunities to support them through the process. And really ensuring, are we creating equity in that process to get the quality that we want? So I think that's certainly a big thing that stood out to me. Fantastic,
thanks Claire. Naseem, can I go to you? It's great to see we got your camera working before we went live, so yeah. Fantastic. Naseem, why don't you introduce yourself and just tell us your initial thoughts?
Yes, I'm Naseem Joban, and I'm from the University of Westminster in the Business School, and more specifically in the School of Management and Marketing. Having said that, my own background is in business psychology, and that's the approach that I kind of take in the work that I am doing. What stood out for me in the report was everything that the students in early career young people of Black heritage had to say, because it really lent gravitas to the the things that I've put in place already. It was like, yes, I know that this exists, and it really, yeah. So it was kind of really supporting the interventions that I have put in place in our school. And then the other thing that I thought that was really good was the figure 4.3, which Tristram's actually been through, which is about retention and progression once people are in employment. And that really is the crux of what I want to talk about, and what I really believe so much in is that you know, students of Black heritage, people of Black heritage have had a bloody horrible time, and that isn't going to go away with increasing numbers. It's a complex process, and we really need to be able to support them. That's what we're trying to do at the university, but I think it's going to take a while. And if we can kind of link it up with what employers are doing, so that there is a smooth transition and that there is a recognition of what has happened, the impact that that's had, and how to move forward in, you know, sort of allyship with people of Black heritage.
Great, thanks, Asim, and we'll definitely come back to some of those themes quite shortly. But you mentioned students, and I'm really pleased that we've got a recent graduate joining the panel who also took part in the report. We thought it was really important with this report. It's just not what employers and educators think, but it's the most important voice of all, which is that of the students, because that's whose careers we are talking about. So Cheld, would you like to introduce yourself and just tell us your initial thoughts?
Hello everybody, and thank you all so much for having me. My name is Cheld and I'm a recent law graduate and aspiring barrister. I would say the thing that stood out to me most, well, there was a lot, but mostly that candidates from ethnic minority backgrounds have to send 60% more applications than their white counterparts, and that's very relevant to me, just because I'm at that stage where I am sending out applications. I have been since, you know, my first year of university, and the fact that I felt as though I was sending out more applications and then actually seeing that in the figures, to know that it's not actually only me, was very eye-opening. And I just really appreciate the entire report, because I feel very seen, and I feel as though it's not just me experiencing this, and therefore it makes me think of ways to solve this issue.
Fantastic, thanks, Sheldon. We'll come back to your experiences of selection process and recruitment process a bit later as well. And last by no means least, all on the panel is Pauline. Would you like to say hello and just give us your initial thoughts?
Hi, so my name is Pauline Maiden. I'm Associate Director for the Careers and Employability Service at the University of Nottingham. I'm also a member of our university's Race Equality Charter implementation group. So I'm really interested in how careers services, I guess, are interacting at an institutional level. So I think the thing that stood out for me, and I agree, that a brilliant report, and there's so much in there, is this thing about inequalities being compounded over time, particularly educationally, and the attainment gap. And I think particularly for Black heritage students, that persists. It persists at the University of Nottingham. I'm sure we know it's a trend across the sector. So you know, that's been writ large, hasn't it, in the report? And what is the role of careers services and careers professionals to help reduce that degree awarding gap?
That's great, fantastic. Thanks, Pauline. And again, we'll get into that subject as well. Just a quick question, Tristram, just before we go back to the panel, because I think it could be quite pertinent to the rest of the conversation. And that was about the, because I think it ties to what we just said about, you know, those within the industry, how diverse we is in industry. And when it came to the composition of the research team, Tristram, and who was involved in this, did you get a good diverse group of people on the taking part in this work? Was it a difficult thing to do?
Well, I mean, I did most of the legwork. But
I did think of a research team. I thought, yeah, the research team was largely you, actually. But
yeah, but I mean, so the way we manage these kinds of projects in ISE, I mean, we're a small organisation, is that we draw in sort of advisory boards. So in this, actually, I would say there was interest from quite a wide range of people in the organisation. So the board itself, the ISE board, but also our D&I group, steering group that we have, And then also we have a research and policy advisory group. So all of those groups we're involved in providing feedback and input into it. Now, if we wanted to look at the actual kind of diversity of those groups, inevitably the D&I group is the most diverse of them, and I suppose that's something that as an organisation we need to try and address. That you know, because in a sense it's one of the things that came out quite strongly, is that we should get away from this idea that diversity issues are issues for people with particular characteristics to solve, and I think, you know, that is probably reflected in the way that we manage it as well. But yeah, I mean, we certainly got a lot of input from a very wide range of people in terms of the actual overall report. So we had like 400 of our members contributed to it, and you know, then student groups and universities and so on. So yeah, lots of people involved in it, lots of different perspectives. Inevitably, we would like more diversity in, I think, the structures of the organisation. I'm sure as everyone else would, and we need to be doing something about that on our board and so on.
We do, yep, and it's definitely in the remit of the D&I task group. Thanks for that. I thought it'd be a good one just to answer that question straight off, and also hopefully that shows you as an audience that I am actually paying attention to the questions which are starting to come through now. So, as I said, please do populate those questions, and hopefully we'll have time to get to them a bit later. If I can go back to the panel. Frankie, if I can come to you first, and I was going to ask you about this retention issue, because we were talking about it. Nassim mentioned it, and I remember at our Clifford Chance hosted, it might have been one of our annual general meetings, but actually your global people partner was speaking, and I think this is a good 3 or 4 years ago. And I remember actually that being one of the first times I'd heard somebody quite senior in an organisation not just talk about recruitment, but very much about actually how important retention was, and that importance of keeping people as once you've hired them. So I'm just going to talk to you about retention, and if there's anything that, whether it's through Clifford Chance or it's through other organisations you worked in, what steps you're seeing organisations to change the culture in the organisation to aid this retention piece.
Yeah, great question. Thanks for that, Stephen. I'd say at Clifford Chance, we've been doing really well recruiting Black talent, especially at the junior end, and we have been for some time. I think in the report, we spoke about our success with rare recruitment and kind of the programs we've used with them. And we even have senior associates now at the firm who've come through those programs. I think naturally, our focus then had to shift to, are we retaining this talent? Retaining Black talent is an issue across the legal sector, but we've worked really hard to focus on data to understand where we need to implement initiatives as a priority, and we're working with practice areas and business professionals, and really trying to have a tailored approach depending on department. We've also worked with Delta Alpha Psi to run a number of insight sessions to understand the lived experience of employees at Clifford Chance with a particular lens on ethnicity. But I think from a culture perspective, I've always found that strong affinity networks can make a real difference when it comes to retention. At Clifford Chance, we've got a network called REACH, which stands for Race, Equality and Celebrated, and it essentially provides employees with a place to discuss and receive support in relation to specific challenges that they may be facing, provides a platform to raise awareness about these issues with colleagues more generally as well, and it also just provides a community, and that's what I always say is so great about affinity networks, through informal, fun, social activities, whether that's you know, a book club or carnival themed event, can really promote this kind of sense of community within a workplace. I think other things that we've done to kind of change the culture include reverse mentoring. I know a lot of firms and a lot of companies have introduced that. I've personally had great success with reverse mentoring. I think it really allows someone who doesn't look like you with very different lived experiences to you to understand the workplace through your eyes. I'm trying to think, what else have we done? We've launched member bubbles, which is essentially informal advice and mentorship to support Black and minority ethnic colleagues, and that's led by senior staff. So you'll be in those bubbles for 12 months. It's only recently launched, but it has been really useful. And I think some things that we've also implemented are, you know, fairly simple, such as signing the HALO code, and that's essentially a code which protects Black colleagues who come to work with natural and protective afro hairstyles. And I know that seems like something that is very obvious to many, but signing has had such a fantastic impact. You know, I was often asked by students, can I have my hair in XYZ style before kind of a vacation scheme? And I've also seen colleagues feel comfortable to wear hairstyles I'd never seen them wear before. So I think there are lots of bigger things, but also some smaller things that can actually have a huge impact as well.
Thanks, Frankie. And I'm just interested in what, I mean, you're relatively new to Clifford Chance, as you said. Does that actually, all those activities, does it make a difference to actually how you yourself or your colleagues feel within the organisation? Do you feel it's quite an ephemeral thing, culture change, isn't it? It's very difficult sometimes to measure and show that it's changed. But do you feel that sort of I guess feeding through into the everyday way that people conduct their business in your organisation?
Yeah, no, I think definitely. I've, you know, often been on kind of affinity network committees, and I've definitely found that people, you know, come to these groups and have conversations of things they may have seen on, you know, Twitter or Instagram or whatever that may be, or different music they're interested in, and have those conversations, because wherever they sit or their direct workplace, you know, their working area, they may not have anyone who looks like them or has the same interests. The conversation is very different. I think it can create a really nice space for someone to kind of, I know they say bring your whole self to work, but bring kind of that aspect of themselves to that particular area where they can discuss things that they want to talk about, essentially.
Great, thanks, Frankie. We've got some questions coming through, so I'll come back to you a bit later on a couple of things being raised. But thanks for that. Claire, can I just come to you now, an enterprise, and one thing that's always struck me around enterprise, and that's just how much enterprise seem to invest all in. You know, I've been to your D&I days. I've been invited to those where it's not just all about your internal people. We get external stakeholders as well, which always impressed me as an example. So it does feel to be whole business and across all levels. And can you just tell us actually a little bit more about what that looks like, and how that strategy works in practice, and how it's enabled in practice? Because it's one thing to say that actually we're going to lead about this, you know, from the top and really make a change, but it's another thing actually making that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's not one answer to this question. There's so many different aspects to kind of contribute, I guess. I think firstly, the importance of D&I certainly comes from our ownership, the Taylor family, and was defined as one of our 8 values, our founding values, back in the 50s. So one of which is our doors are open. So highlighting the importance of, as an employer, that as an organisation, we're welcoming to our customers and to our employees. You know, my experience starting at enterprise quite a few years ago now, but you know, really from day one, you are introduced to diversity and the importance of diversity, and then as you move through the organisation, you have lots of opportunities then to become champions and leaders, and that's down to even how we promote our employees. You know, within, I think the important piece here is that it's not a separate entity in the organisation. It's interwoven through all business lines, and certainly comes from our senior leadership team. And as it's important to our ownership, it's important to our senior leaders. This isn't a HR-led initiative. This is led by our general managers in the organisation. And I guess even down to, for example, each business line, we have a diversity scorecard that each business line measures themselves against every year and highlights what are we doing well, but also where are our opportunities, so we can benchmark different business lines at enterprise. It's in our interview questions to become a leader at enterprise. You know, you have to talk about what you've done to be an ambassador and a leader for D&I, and that's really important. You know, as we look at our future talent coming through from a, you know, an allyship perspective, and how our leaders become, you know, those ambassadors in the organisation. Our leadership, kind of to Frankie's point, that leading by listening, and we at the start of this year hosted listening sessions for our employees to ensure that we were again seeing or hearing about the lived experiences of our Black and ethnic minority employees. Again, really, really important, and we learned a lot from that, and that's an ongoing sort of reverse mentoring program that we're running, and we learned a heck of a lot as an employer, and it made us understand that there's so much more opportunity that we've got to improve our kind of working culture. I think, you know, again, it's about all elements. So kind of back to what you said, Stephen, you know, we're part of the MSD UK, so even looking at suppliers, making sure that we are looking at the ownership of those suppliers. I had a meeting this morning actually with a potential supplier, and really kind of making sure we've got a really, you know, strong presence of minority suppliers to us at Enterprise. So it's looking at, like you say, it's interwoven into everything that we do. We've recently, as a company, through our Enterprise Foundation, we've recently donated $55 million to some local racial equality and social equality projects. And that includes supporting projects like the National Literature Trust. So we go into schools and to those cold spot areas around the UK to help children to read. And I think, you know, just an example of one of many projects that we're working alongside that our employees can take part in shows that we're kind of looking at every single sort of angle and avenue. And just from a recruitment perspective, I think it's, again, in the report, we partnered with Loughborough University. In fact, it was a Loughborough University-led event on their Future Black Talent programme, but then that made us think that there's so much more that we can and should be doing. So now we're currently, through October, running a national campaign to then hopefully offer some opportunities to some young black talent in December on our opportunity to sort of insight days and learn more and create some better networks for those students to be able to become a little more employable. So I think a very long answer to your short question, Stephen, but I think it's, you know, we're hitting it every perspective, but it's ingrained with our culture because it's certainly important to our ownership, and that's sort of then becomes important to all of us, you know. So yeah, so much we're doing.
And I get the sense it very much is again, it's not just about the recruitment piece. It is because the senior leadership are bought in at all levels. It's about, it cuts right across the culture of the organisation. It's not just a recruitment initiative.
It is, and we closely partner with business in the community. We sponsored their Race at Work survey. You know, our senior vice president was on a panel to talk about what we're doing with, you know, supporting black talent, and it's definitely very important to our leadership.
I had a question here from Gabby that I can see that's probably worth dropping this in now, actually. And she mentioned, you talked about them briefly about supply chain, so it's not just your organisation, it's about how you deal with. I just wonder if you can just elaborate on that a little bit. Is it a requirement of the suppliers you work with? Is it something you encourage suppliers? I just wonder how that, again, what does that look like in practice?
Yeah, so when we decide to take on a new supplier, we have to create that transparency around the supplier and the ownership of the supplier. So we basically track that information, and we are, you know, heavily encouraged to make sure that we're looking at, you know, diverse suppliers, diverse ownership, and we're kind of making sure that we're very inclusive from a decision-making perspective. So we partner, as I said, with MSD UK to ensure that all stakeholders in a company who have, I guess, a requirement as part of their role is to liaise with suppliers, that we kind of can centrally kind of track that and ensure that, you know, we're giving all suppliers, you know, an opportunity, but also certainly sort of really focusing on those minority suppliers to ensure that we are trying to bring as many into the business as we can.
Great, thanks, Claire. Another quick couple of people mentioned this. Somebody said they've been looking for the report online while we've been talking. You won't find it just yet because a big release is tomorrow, so it'll be published tomorrow and it'll be on the website. You'll get a link with that. It's partly because we've had some press interest, so we put an embargo on it till tomorrow. So don't feel the need to hunt around the website. You'll get an email tomorrow with links to the reports and everything, and it'll be available online then. Right, thanks, Claire. Nassim, can I just turn to you now? So one of the things you mentioned at the start was, you know, this coaching support, the support for students, not just once they're at university, but also once they've actually joined an organisation. And could you just tell us a bit more about why you think that is so important and what kind of difference it can make?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So what, yeah, I mean, I think I just want to first of all acknowledge what people of colour, people of Black heritage actually go through on a day-to-day kind of experience. There are microaggressions, there are mega aggressions, and that really has a knock-on effect over time. So what we've done in our school is develop what I call the deep impact approach. And the deep impact approach is something that really recognises the complexity and the depth of what has led to a lack of confidence, a lack of trust, defense mechanisms, and things, you know, which have really been part of the reality of people of colour and people of Black heritage. So in a way, what I'm suggesting is that, you know, we work on kind of decolonizing the curriculum, having an inclusive curriculum, making sure that people are represented. And so, you know, sort of from a literature perspective, where we would use theories from African theories on management and marketing, as well as kind of from across the world, and then allowing students to recognize that, that they have a voice as well, and encouraging that. And that all takes time. So the other thing that we've done is that we've incorporated mentoring within our curriculum. And I've designed the mentoring aspects in a way where we're really preparing them to go into the workplace and understand what's going on. So, you know, so I believe it can't just be mentoring and coaching from the perspective of just general mentoring and coaching. People who are involved with this support must be people who understand it and who know and who are aware of the experiences that people of Black heritage have gone through, and how to sort of kind of repair that, how to heal those relationships. And I think that certainly coaching is an amazing way to do that within, especially, you know, by employers, to provide that one-to-one support, to make it almost mandatory, and to develop the person of Black heritage, you know, in this way, really focusing on them and developing them. So that's why I think it's a very necessary and an important step. And I want to kind of give a little bit of a background about why I, you know, thought that this was so important. We had people from the Home Office come and talk to our students, and they were people from the Black networks in the Home Office. And so that was great. You know, you had Black faces presenting, encouraging Black students to apply to the Home Office. And then it just occurred to me that here we are really trying to make an effort to build the confidence of our students, to give them voice, to help develop their self-esteem. But then what's going to happen when they go into these organizations? And I was correct in understanding that there wasn't any support. This is only going back 18 months ago. There wasn't support for them. So, you know, I think somebody, who was it Claire, who was talking about the networks? I can't remember who it was talking about the networks. And I feel that the network, was it Frankie? Yeah, saying that, you know, the networks are really, really great. And our own networks have provided a lot of sort of starting off, ideas generating. But I feel if we really want to individually, personally, and deeply develop our people of Black heritage in their roles at work, I think that coaching is the best way to do it, by people who have been trained, who are allies, who fully understand the experiences that Black people go through. And also another experience, we had an EDI conference on football, and we had footballers there talking about how Black footballers who'd had really a hard time with racism within football. And I was very, very sort of transformed and moved by what they were saying, what a couple of them were saying, that it was coaching that got them back on track. It was coaching that held them through those difficult times. It was coaching that helped to reverse a lot of the power that was lost to them through those racist attacks. So that's why we really would advocate that we have coaching. We have group mentoring and individual mentoring at the university, but I think if we can organise a sort of deep support for them with coaching in the workplace, and that will go a long way towards developing our Black leaders.
Great, thanks, Naseem. Just a question here again. Actually, it's probably worth dropping in because it's pertinent for now, and it's Jan's asked about talking about being, we now understand the hidden curriculum at university, and I think when Jan's question is about how employers can also tackle this once students enter the workplace, career pathways, networking, allyship, etc. Do you see a link between those things and that conversation carrying on into employment?
Is that to me?
Yeah, I was just going to ask you. I was thinking.
I think I've noticed a huge difference in how our Black students are actually more articulate as a result of me very, very consciously changing the curriculum. I've changed it dramatically in our pilot study, in our decolonizing study that we're having assessed on a module in leadership. And now I started this process sort of informally about 18 months ago, and I noticed that we were online then and students kept leaving. And I think it was really Black students kept leaving. I think it was quite hard for them to, kind of have this opened up to them. And then I took it very gently and included more and more sort of historical stuff and understanding stuff. And it was very interesting to note then white students, and in particular our male white students, became keen allies. And now, just 3 weeks into the new curriculum of the decolonized curriculum, we're having everybody not able to, kind of get a word in because everyone's so keen. And I remember one of my colleagues said it feels like somebody's kind of put a light in them. So, and that's what I mean by giving voice. We have allowed, through the decolonization of the curriculum, we have allowed people to have a voice, people of Black heritage to have a voice, as well as other EDI groups. But that's the group. I know that research shows that if we focus on our students of Black heritage, everything else just falls into place, really. So it's that priority of, the groups that have been, if you like, the worst affected over time.
Great, thanks, Naseem. Really good. Cheld, can I come to you now as the student voice in all this? As I said at the start, I mean, often we don't. I don't think we come to students enough, actually, because bottom line is it's your careers we're talking about. It's your experiences through education and into work. So I had a question just to pose to you, which is around. I just what is your experience of that sort of application and recruitment process, and what do you think employers could do?
So I would say that my experience of the application and recruitment process has been quite much like a roller coaster, and I feel like I'm still on it. I'm always grateful for organizations such as, Be Smart, which was at St. Mary's University, which provides opportunities for young BAME students to get experience in their desired industries. The Young Black Professionals Network, increasing Black representation, even the Grays in Black Excellence Charter. These things are things that I actively look for because I know that I have a chance without feeling as though I haven't gotten an opportunity just because I am a Black woman, or through fear of unconscious bias. So I'm grateful for those organizations. They've allowed me to be heard, and I have gained skills which won't only benefit myself in my future career, but will also benefit those organizations that I've worked for. I feel like the funding of the organizations is something that employers need to work on because, for example, let's say Be Smart, there may be 5 organizations that they reach out to, or firms that they reach out to, and sometimes they may not get a response. And I'm not saying that happens, but it's just an example. And I feel like employers could actually be more active and purposeful when saying they want to be diverse. There's an opportunity right in front of you to, take on a few students and give them the opportunity in their industries that they want to go into, and therefore taking that opportunity is only going to benefit the firm in wanting to be more diverse, whilst also giving those students the opportunity, that light up moment that gives them the opportunity to thrive in their sector that they want to, whilst gaining invaluable experience. I would say that sometimes the recruitment process can be draining, and I feel like the disproportionality in, putting through an application and then getting feedback after the interview is very disproportionate. So I may spend a month, doing this application for a scholarship or for an internship, but then I don't get feedback because there's been too many applicants. That is really disheartening, and I feel like the reachability of the interviewers after the interview process is also very lacking, and it just has a really negative toll on students, I think, because you're getting constant rejection but no feedback. And I do understand that there are a lot of applications, but I feel like more of an effort should be put into post-interview interaction. I feel like what employers can also do is kind of consider quotas, and I spoke about this in my dissertation as a solution to the lack of Black representation within senior positions of the legal field specifically. And when I say quotas, I don't mean just have 5 Black people within senior management. I mean that the quotas are there as a bare minimum. To be considered diverse, you need to meet that quota, and you should be exceeding it. And when it comes to retention, putting more effort into retention methods. I love what Nassim, Francesca, and Claire have said about, going into communities, about accepting Black hair, especially as a Black woman. That's so important to me. About what was it? My mistake. Decolonizing the curriculum, that was one huge thing for me. As a student, I was given the opportunity at my university to create a module which actually aimed to decolonize the curriculum within the legal sector. And just having that opportunity, having a senior member of staff hear my ideas and go with it and have it publicized is fantastic, and it will encourage more students, from young talented Black students, to follow. And you will find that not in the near future, that there is a more diverse culture within firms and stuff, because we are being heard and we're telling each other, oh, this firm was really great, they accepted my hair, I didn't feel uncomfortable, they understood the culture. So everything that's going on is fantastic, and I feel like that needs to be publicized a lot more. I also wanted to talk about unconscious bias training. That's something that I think is really important. So as a university student, we are showing the potential to be in those senior positions, and therefore I feel like the potential to be in those senior positions could be helped by being taught what unconscious bias training is, because we are the future recruiters of this generation. Being taught at such a fundamental time is necessary, because we're showing that we're willing to learn and willing to absorb that information, and therefore it kind of trickles up instead of trickling down. We're taught from university that this is what unconscious bias is, this is how to avoid it, or this is what to consider when you feel like you have unconscious bias, and therefore when they get into their senior positions, they remember that training from university at a critical stage, and it's almost a natural process of eliminating that unconscious bias. And I think that's really, really necessary. The last thing that I would say is feedback. Feedback is so necessary for students, whether it's an essay or whether it's an interview practice or an actual interview. I don't think people understand the value of feedback when it comes to those things, and it just shows us and guides us where we can improve. And even taking it that step further, instead of just giving someone feedback, if you see a potential trainee, for example, and you feel like they had the talent but they just missed something out, and that's why another candidate got the job, you could take them on and train them on the skill that they are lacking, so that the next time they apply, they have that skill and they are able to take up the position that they should have had. I think also making internships, and I'm speaking more within the legal field here, making them more available. I feel like the stigma of a small pool of talent is quite dated, and it's truly limiting firms and chambers, especially when it comes to Black talent. There's a huge number of talented young aspiring barristers, aspiring solicitors out there, but because of this small pool of talent and the barriers that are against us, we aren't able to truly show what the talents that we have and the skills that we have when it comes to implementing that within the legal field. So I feel like opening up internships, having a broader range of internships throughout the year would really help across the sector, not just in law, just in careers in general. And the very last thing, is that I feel that employers could spend a little bit more time on their aftercare process when it comes to applications, as I said before. So just letting them know where they could have done better. Like I said, taking them in, saying, look, we wanted to give you the job, but you need to work on this. Spending even a day just talking to them about where they can improve, I think would really, really help students and their mental health when it comes to applications as well, because it can get really tiring being consistently rejected and not being given feedback. And so mental health is a very big thing within organizations, but not much thought has been given to mental health throughout an application process and the effect of consistent rejection.
I think that's a really good point, and something that as an industry, I think we're only just starting to realise, and I'm sort of picking up one or two more conversations on this. This isn't just because of the pandemic. Application numbers have been going up consistently over the last decade, changes, technology, etc. And actually, as an industry, we are just rejecting tens upon tens of thousands of people. And we're not at a place where we're giving really, like you said, constructive feedback. And I think we all ask a lot more of students. We definitely do than, back in my day, of just the process you have to go through and the commitment you've got to show. And I think, yes, I think that's a really important point that you raised there, Child. Can I just come to a question we had at the start of this, actually, from Victoria? I've been waiting to ask it of you, and actually, it was around you mentioned the program actually, and Yasmina, who's the co-chair of our D&I steering group, she's at St Mary's, so she'll be pleased about the plug you made about their program. And I guess the question was actually around your views on these targeted programs. Do you think they're a good thing? Because I know sometimes that students have said, well, we don't want to be treated any differently. We don't want to have this special program just for us. We just want to apply for jobs and do our work. I don't know, I wonder if did you share that view, or do you not mind actually having programs that specifically target you? Or is it just, students are very diverse and have different opinions? So yeah, just your thoughts on that. So that's a bit of a rambling way of asking the question, but,
no problem.
But what are your thoughts on that?
I personally love the idea of specifically tailored programs, because I personally feel without those programs, I would not have gained the opportunities that I did, simply because the programs that I've signed up to have mostly been within my university circle. And without that, I feel like I would not have been prepared for the real world in terms of recruitment and things like that, because I wasn't taught solely from my degree about the rigors of the application processes, but within those programs, I was given the time and attention needed so that I could understand what I would be getting into, how to structure your CV, how to have a CV specifically for law, and then specifically for retail, for example. And I feel like with the normal programs, there's almost an air of expectation that you should know how to do this already. And if you don't know how to do it, then you won't be considered. And so I absolutely think that these organizations and these programs are a necessity, and I think those who don't want it, it's completely understandable. They want to have a quote unquote normal experience when it comes to recruitment and getting a job, but there are people like me who greatly benefit from it, and I think that that's something that employers should definitely keep up.
Smashing. Thanks, Chad. That's really good to hear. Pauline, can I just come to you finally? One of the things that when we were having a chat before, when we were putting this webinar together, and I think it's something you mentioned at the start as well, and it is this issue of the attainment gap. And you spoke to that it's something that that career services can help with. Could you just explain a little bit more about that attainment gap and how you think it will help outcomes for students by tackling it?
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. It's a really important part of our work, actually, and I think it's an area where services can contribute, but it might not be perhaps all that obvious how to. So I guess in the short term, thinking about how we can help to reduce that awarding gap, promoting the value of work experience. We know that there's loads of evidence which points to the fact that students who do a placement year tend to get that academic uplift, and I think that's something that we can do from the practical support, the coaching, but also really promoting that for Black heritage students, because it will give that academic uplift. Sharing our data insights. So actually, most services routinely collect, analyse, interpret and use the data on student participation. We're really fortunate in Nottingham that we've got an amazing business information team. We've really looked at where we add value and how we support students. To the extent that we look at graduate outcomes, we look at how students engage with us. And so we can see a correlation between students who have at least one careers appointment and the fact that it does increase a graduate outcomes score if they are a Black graduate, when compared to their Black peers who didn't attend any careers appointments. And it's different across the different subjects, but you can see how we are helping students, and if there are issues with awarding gaps, and that is quite a long-term thing that needs to be fixed, at least knowing that careers services can boost Black heritage students graduate outcomes I think is a really positive thing to know as a careers service. And then just being involved at an institutional level, contributing and adding to the areas, access and participation plans. I'm a member of the Race Equality Charter Bronze Award Implementation Group. Gosh, that's a mouthful. I was involved with the submission and now I'm involved with it. Now we've got the action plan in place. So things like, one of our actions is that we're a key partner in a change project that all new courses and programs need to incorporate evidence of advice and feedback from employers. So it's our responsibility to make sure that that is inclusive feedback and it is benefiting Black heritage students. We're also involved in things like program level curriculum redesign. It's really important strategically that we're at the table. Working with colleagues around access and participation plans, thinking about how career services and working with employers can help students develop that sense of belonging. Graduate outcomes isn't a access and participation plan metric, but during our annual reviews this year, we asked that of all our heads of schools. How can we contribute to your school enhancement plans? So, in science and engineering, we're supporting their targeted mentoring schemes. And then I think, and this is a shout out to all our many careers professionals who I hope are on the call today, that during the pandemic, we've supported students through really difficult times on a one-to-one basis. It could be the only time that they get to talk to someone on a one-to-one basis some weeks. And I think as a sector, we need to be more assertive about the value as careers services that we bring to the whole student experience, particularly supporting Black heritage students. We know colleagues who have worked with students and helped them stay on their course. When we know that a lot of Black students, actually more than our white students, do end up leaving their degree programs, that's the kind of work that makes a difference.
Great, thanks, Pauline. I am conscious of time because we've gone slightly over our allotted time. So, and apologies if I can't get to everybody's questions because we've had really quite a few come through, which I've tried to deal with as we go along. Quick reminder that the report's out tomorrow, and some of the questions in here around what employers are doing, data points, etc. That is in that report. But can I just finish back on the I guess the employer piece, because that is the largest proportion of our audience. And I wanted to just wrap a few of the questions through kind of into one, if I can, and that's for you, Frankie and Claire. And a few people have asked around, you know, selection techniques, about employers using AI. I mean, my understanding is employers still don't use AI very much in recruitment. That's a bit of a misunderstanding. But it's around, you know, what do you do with your recruitment tools to ensure that they don't show bias? And then another question that came through was actually, what are the really good data points to measure? Obviously, applications and who actually gets a job offer are pretty straightforward, but are there any good data points that you can cover in there? So I just thought, yeah, let's get into some practicalities just for the last questions on actually what you can do in terms of building those recruitment process that Gerald was talking about, that we subject all these poor students to, that have to go through. Who'd like to go first? Claire, Frankie?
Yeah, I don't mind going first. We don't adopt AI. I think, you know, the more research we do around AI, actually there is bias in AI too. So we don't adopt AI currently. I think, I can't remember who mentioned it, but we put some intense and conscious bias training in with our recruiters. So they go through some quite intense training ahead of joining our team. I can't remember the third part of your question, Stephen, but I think when we look at the
what the data points
yes,
apart from just attraction and job offers?
Yeah, we look at the different parts of the process. So where do our students drop out the most, and why? So, you know, that's ongoing for us. We have an online application, we have a face-to-face, well, virtual face-to-face interview with a recruiter, and then they go to the line manager and visit at one of our locations. So we're really trying to look at where do they drop out of the process more. And typically we find that just the application alone and actually selling themselves and really doing their research and tailoring their application to the role they're applying for, we certainly find that's probably where our biggest sort of challenges are with students, and working with universities to try and help students become better, I guess, at selling themselves on an application. So that's what we're finding.
Great, thanks, Claire. And Frankie, is there anything that you would add to that from your sort of Clifford Chance perspective?
Yeah, not too much more really. We also don't use AI. We do have tests. We get students to do a critical thinking test. There's a lot of work we have to do to ensure there's no adverse impact on particular groups, especially when it gets to that interview stage as well. We actually use a tool created by Rare Recruitment called Hemisphere to really ensure that we give you know, comprehensive kind of unconscious bias training to our interviewers. They've even recently added in a new element which actually goes through the history of Black Britain. So all of our kind of interviewers have to, you know, understand all of that, then go through all the different training before they can interview. So I think, you know, it's very similar to what Claire said. We just keep really close eye on each stage of our process where candidates are dropping out, you know, doing just lots of research to see, is this us? You know, where's it gone wrong in the different stages, and why is that? And I think it's just something that you have to keep reviewing. We do see changes, you know, year on year. So it's something that we just keep a close eye on and just make sure that our process is as fair as it possibly can be.
Fantastic, great. Thanks, Frankie. And thanks to all our panelists. I've got more questions we could go through, but I'm really conscious of time, and I can see the numbers starting to drop off, which means people probably want to grab a quick bite to eat before they start their 2 o'clock Zoom call. So I'm conscious you all may have to do the same. So really, we do appreciate you taking so much time, both to really get involved in producing this report. So like I said, that's the reason for doing this webinar. You know, it really is a very thorough piece of work that Tristram has led, and we're very, you know, pleased with all the contributions. We think there's lots of stuff for us as an industry to get our teeth stuck into. As I said at the start, we've recorded the webinar, so all of you who've registered will get a link back to the recording, so you can pick up any bits that you miss, want to revisit, but also please do share that amongst your team so we can get the learnings out there as much as possible. So on that note, I'll end it. thank you very much again. Thank you to all the panelists. If anybody's got anything they would like to follow up on, then please get in touch with myself or Tristram here at the ISE. So thank you all very much. Talk to you all soon. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.